Where you start out in life, you could have the same dreams and the same future as someone who did come from power and privilege.
Let's start specific.
As we're graduating people from college with a bunch of debt loans and unable to find a job in the economy.
How would you?
Yeah, I think we should be a lot more aggressive about it, but the truth is we need a new president to get rid of Obamacare. As long as Obama's president, we're not going to be...
So were you listening to what he had to say, or were you watching him dab the forehead? I can certainly empathize with Marco Rubio, the hot Florida air.
It's Florida. You saw everyone fanning themselves in the background, but yeah, it doesn't look good.
Right, but I'm not running for president, as we mentioned.
Right.
Welcome back to Newsmax Now. Here joining me now, Miranda Kahn, J.D. Hayworth, and also with us is Brian Crowley, the editor of the Crowley Political Report. Brian, how you doing?
I'm great. How are you?
It's good to hear from you. We'll get to you in just a second. Let's talk off, though, looking back at what we saw there from Marco Rubio last night. Of course, this was in Miami and South Florida during the interview with Sean Hannity, constantly touching his brow there. J.D., as someone who's been in that position before, what do you think?
Let me just say this, because I don't want to be accused of being too rough on Rubio. Let me say his announcement. There has not been a more masterful use of the word yesterday since John Lennon and Paul McCartney sat down those years ago to write the song Yesterday. Rubio was great in the announcement, but the follow-up failed to reflect advanced planning. You got to have an advanced team. You got to think about the atmospherics of the interview, and to have him in that situation where, while he gave some rational answers, looked less than calm, cool, and collected, that is not the image a presidential candidate wants to have in the interview. The speech itself was great.
Brian, let's also talk about the audience there. A very South Florida-looking audience, very typical of what you'd see in Miami, but not necessarily a good cross-section of the United States. Who outside of Florida are the big Rubio supporters at this point of the race? Brian.
I'm sorry. We were moving stuff here in the studio, so I missed your question.
No problem. Who outside of Florida is Rubio's real big support base?
Well, I think his real big support base will be the same support base he had when he started his U.S. Senate race. I think Tea Party conservatives, hard right conservatives in Iowa and New Hampshire South Carolina will be very receptive to listening to Marco Rubio's message. And you know, he has competition with Ted Cruz and others in that realm, but I think they're going to be very, very interested in Marco Rubio.
All right, JD, you watched the performance last night. I shouldn't call it a performance, but in some ways it was. And it's important, the optics there. A friendly crowd, of course, with Sean Hannity. He's not going to hit him too hard on some of these issues. Did Rubio hit a home run? Did he hit a single? Did he hit a double?
The speech was a grand slam. The question becomes, and this becomes a larger question when you're out doing these interviews, when you're out going from town to town in Iowa, you got to have an advanced team. You got to have people there who are experienced and know what they are doing. In my experience, I once pledged if I ever ran for national office, I'd get an advanced team from Wisconsin, because those guys were so on target when I went up there to speak one day. But all those guys are promised to Scott Walker, probably. Marco has to mind his P's and Q's and have the right kind of team around him for future appearances.
And you bring up experience. That's one of the things that Rubio has been talking about. He's been kind of criticized and praised at the same time for being the youngest person to throw his name into the race for the presidency in 2016. I'm curious, Brian, do you think that will work to his advantage, being so young as he is?
Well, I mean, you know, John F. Kennedy was in his 40s when he became president. It's not unusual for people in their 40s to run for president. I think his generational message in trying to say that we don't want to go back into the past, clear shots at his good friend Jeb Bush and at Hillary Clinton. You know, we need to have a new generation of politics. I mean, even that's not particularly a new message. Every candidate says they want to do something new, but he wants to be the face of something new. He wants to be the face, you know, that youthful, good-looking Hispanic guy who's going to bring a whole new message to the Republican Party. And frankly, the Republican Party needs some new blood in order to
and he's certainly trying
deal
to fill
with some
that
of the
role,
complicated
Brian.
issues.
A couple
that they
things
have
we want
in
to
front
get
of
to
them.
as well as before we say goodbye real quick here. We had the issue with the sweating last night with Marco Rubio. It sounds trite, maybe a little topical, but these things do matter. Of course, Rubio got hit for that sip of water he took during the response to the State of the Union speech a while back, but he also raised over $100,000 from that for his PAC, so genius move. Maybe he's going to start selling hankies online. Also, this stuff matters because we can look back to 1960 during the debate between Kennedy and Nixon, one of the first televised debates, was sweating, and it affected him in the race.
Well, I don't, If the biggest mistake Marco Rubio makes in this campaign is that nobody wiped his brow before his meeting with Hannity last night, then he's going to have a pretty successful campaign. I think the sweating issue, which I thought was appalling when I watched it, but I think it's largely overblown, and there's not a single voter out there who's going to make a decision based on what happened on Hannity last night.
And again, let's acknowledge presidential politics is two-thirds theater. There is a performance angle in this. Remember, the great host on Late Night, on Tonight, Johnny Carson, would always rally from a bad joke. I can see Marco marketing the "don't sweat it" hanky that he just talked about and raising some money with it. So don't be surprised if he takes lemons and tries to make lemonade.
Or chicken and make some chicken salad.
Well, let's stay away from that.
Brian Kelly, we'll have you back because we want to talk about Hillary Clinton's mystery van and why there's been a little bit of reluctance from some of the candidates in Florida to fill Rubio's Senate seat. We'll talk about that coming up. Brian's going to be back with us. Thanks, JD. Miranda and I will be back with more of your top headlines coming up.